Welcome to the Parenting in the Digital Age podcast. Many parents are concerned that their child might be falling behind. Others are just looking for ways to help their children thrive, not just in the classroom, but socially, and well into their future careers. Each episode, we explore the challenges facing parents in the modern world, from behavior, education, and nutrition to device and gaming addiction. We interview a range of leaders in the area of childhood development to help you successfully navigate parenting in the digital age. Here is your host, Jamie Buttigieg.
Hello parents and welcome to Parenting in the Digital Age, the podcast where we delve into the unique challenges and opportunities of raising children in today's fast-paced, tech-driven world. Each episode features conversations with experts and thought leaders who provide actionable insights and practical guidance for navigating life as modern parents. Today, I'm very excited to welcome a special guest, Chananya Abraham, a psychotherapist with a heart for empowering individuals. Chananya has dedicated over a decade to mastering the art of communication within the intricate dynamics of parent and adolescent relationships. Chananya's expertise extends to working with teenagers, young adults and their families to be the best versions of themselves. His approach is deeply rooted in the transformative power of resilience, empathy and the willingness to embrace life's complexities with a sense of humour. His mantra, "And that's okay," is testament to his philosophy that within the chaos of life lies the potential for growth. And as the host of the acclaimed podcast Parenting is Easy, Said No One Ever, Chananya blends humour with heartfelt insights, offering a fresh perspective on the trials and tribulations of parenthood. Hello Chananya, welcome to the show. Please share with our listeners in your own words what you do and what you are passionate about.
So first of all, Jamie, thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor to be here. So my name is Chananya Abraham. I am the host of a podcast as well, Parenting is Easy, Said No One Ever. And I'm also a psychotherapist. I am based in America, in Connecticut to be specific. And my practice is based around parenting and specifically around the relationship that parents have with their children and children have with their parents. And also working with children and adolescents as they transition through different stages in their life, from high school into college, university, and as they start acclimating themselves into their careers. And I think that concept of communication and relationships within those different transition places can be very difficult at times. And that's something that we talk about a lot in my room and the workshops that I run and on the podcast as well, because I guess the motto, the way I like talking about it is how to like your kids as much as you love them and vice versa. So that's something that we focus a lot on.
Wonderful. Thank you for that intro. So let's talk about communication. In the digital age, I speak to many parents and they feel disconnected from their teens, and some parents accepting that as the norm. It's just part of teenhood. Maybe we're supposed to go through this disconnection stage. But, are there any strategies or ideas for parents to help them stay connected with their teenagers in this, particularly digital era?
Yeah, so it's a really tough question, and it's really hard to say. Okay, well, let's get through everything that's needed within a half hour. But just to give like some basics for how to go about it. I heard a comment that from a mentor of mine. The way he likes talking about it is we want to create an environment where instead of kids are looking at a situation like, oh, I don't want to tell my parents that. What we want to turn it into is, oh, I can't wait to tell my parents. And I think in order to create an environment like that where kids want to share with us, we have to create an environment where kids want to share with us. And that comes down to a few basic things. And I think one of the most important parts of that is keeping the door open. And it's not just about saying, hey, you can come talk to me whenever you want. But even if there are things that you're doing that are really important, it could be prepping for the next day. It could be the laundry. Or it could be cooking dinner. Excuse me. But whatever it is that we're doing, to create an environment where when they want to talk to us, they feel like they have us to be talking to. And I think that's very important when it comes to any sort of communication and relationship we want to have with our kids, is creating the environment for them that they feel like, you know what, I could go talk to my parents. I'm having a problem at school on my sports team. I'm having a problem with some peers. I'm having a problem with a teacher or a potential person I want to get into a relationship with. But I know I can't talk to them now because they're busy with that, and they always get upset at me when I talk to them about that. so I'm not going to talk to them. I mean, I'll come back to it a little later. What happens later? Yeah, it's not that big of a deal. I don't need to talk to them about it. So we created an environment where we're not really accessible. So I think one of the most important things is to create an environment to be successful, or in that relationship aspect of things, is to let them know that, hey, this door is not only open and unlocked, but it's easy access to you pretty much at any time. Now, that doesn't mean that there doesn't have to be times where a child knows that, hey, I can't go talk to my parents because they're doing something. But I think them knowing that I'm available as a parent at all times can be very helpful to that relationship. So that's really, I think, the first thing that is very, very important. I think another thing that I like talking about is creating an environment or a specific place. Some people might call it like a safe place where conversation and communication can happen. So with the way that looks like, and the way I talk about it, is creating a time or a place where things can be said, whether it's critiques, anger, or even just to vent about the parenting skills or lack thereof sometimes that us parents have. And I think it's very, very normal and common for parents to go through stages where they're going through things and they don't necessarily parent the way they would like. But to give kids the opportunity to talk about it and say, hey, I don't like when you do that, or I didn't like when this happened when my friends come over. But just to have that happen by the dinner table sometimes can be really hard. So when we create situations where it's an open concept environment, so it could be once a week going out to a store together and saying, hey, during this time, you can say whatever you want. It won't be held against you. It won't be anything that I have a right to say, to either reprimand or disagree or go on the defense. But creating an environment where, yes, you can say those things that in other situations might not be allowed, but we're making those situations very, very accessible to our kids to be able to say things to us. And obviously within limit, within reason, and the delivery should be as such where it is respectful. But I think creating that environment where, when we go out for ice cream or when we go for this drive, no one else is in the car, there's no phones, no music even, but we're just going to talk about certain things that are happening. And that environment is, okay, I hear you. I'm gonna think about that. I'm gonna take that into consideration. So I think those two things really help set the whole entire situation that will hopefully help when it comes to kids wanting to communicate with us. Because remember, communication is two ways. And as much as we may want our children to be interviewing, to be able to have a conversation with us, but if we don't create an environment for that, then it's never going to happen. And we as parents have a responsibility to create that environment for our kids. So those are the two main things that I would say are important in order to harness and to bring in that concept of communication with our kids.
That's powerful and practical advice. Even as a parent, like I'm guilty myself, of just thinking the environment exists, and saying, hey, I'm here if you need me, but I'm not actually there. I'm not actually present. I'm not actually available. And I like how you set that up and you create that space for them, and you're able to say to them, hey, this is a time when you can say these things, or if you need to say these things, and I'll listen, I won't judge, and then listening and not judging and listening to what they actually have to say. So thank you. That's really important advice. On your website, I was reading about some of the therapies and the things that you do. What is DBT? Help me understand what DBT is and perhaps how it can be applied to everyday parenting scenarios.
Oh, that's a great question, and one that at least now that I've been in the field for over a decade and having an opportunity to really get to know it. I first want to talk a little bit about why I like DBT, and then we'll get into what it is. So DBT stands for dialectical behavioral therapy. Pretty much what it's meaning to work on is the concept of choices. We have a dialect. We have two different decisions in our head. Like, let's say use an example of, well, I want more ice cream, but I don't want to gain weight. So what do I do? And there are different things that could be done within the framework of what the therapy is that could be very, very beneficial. And I think creating an environment where we have choices, we have things that we can do, but not only that, even in choices, we're going to make mistakes. And we can also use that as a learning experience. The example that I like thinking of is going in some sort of corn maze or some sort of contraption where you have to go from one end of the room to another end of the room. In that, it could be a little bit difficult at times, or you might hit a dead end. But what did you learn? that I learned that this area is not an area that I can go to get to the end. It's an area that I learned doesn't work. And I think in our situations and experiences in life and in parenting, certain situations work, certain situations don't work. And that's okay. We learn from it. So it's not that I failed, but I learned that this doesn't work. And I think that itself could be a very, very powerful tool when it comes to parenting, to realize, okay, this way of dealing with things with my child is not necessarily going to work with this child. For people that have multiple children, you can't take all the tricks and modalities and things and experience with one child and say, well, let me just apply this to exhibit B. It doesn't work that way, because every child is different, and we have to know that every child is different. So DBT is very, very customizable for each individual and for each situation and for each person themselves. Every situation is different. So it might be different for how I'm going to deal with this situation on Tuesdays as opposed to Wednesdays. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So DBT sort of is very customizable and allows us to sort of take different things that could be beneficial within the framework of what DBT is. That can be, I think, very, very helpful. Now, the other reason why I really like it, it's started by someone, Marsha Linehan, who is actually still alive, and I think she's based in Washington State, and she actually started it, and her whole experience with saying we need to do something was because at one point, unfortunately, she was actually inpatient. She had to be hospitalized, and I think her diagnosis was bipolar, and realizing that, hey, just because I have something wrong with me doesn't mean that there is something wrong with me, and let me work on that. Let me see what I can do, and that's where the inspiration behind what DBT actually came from, for it to be something that is for the masses now and used for a lot of cases, not just for bipolar. For people that are experiencing bipolar type symptoms. Just because you might have it doesn't mean you're actually diagnosed with it, and that applies to so many different situations. Just because I might have a problem with my emotion regulation, which is one of the main, I guess you could say, pillars of what DBT is. So how do I regulate my emotions in this type of situation? And I think it's really, really customizable and really helpful to say, okay, there are different parts of what DBT can offer. And I highly recommend to all your listeners to look into the four main pillars of what DBT is. And, we talk about interpersonal effectiveness, we talk about distress tolerance, we talk about emotion regulation and mindfulness. Those are the four main parts of what DBT are. And the way I sort of look at it is, imagine the Olympic symbol, where you have these rings that are all attached to each other. And if you pull one, the other one is going to be pulled as well. And that's what the four legs are, is that, yes, you're going to work on distress tolerance and how to tolerate and how to de-stress in different situations. But at the same time, you're also working on emotion regulation. So it's sort of working with these things together to mold a parental guidance technique that could be beneficial for this type of situation.
Yeah, wow, incredible. And so when parents are dealing with, mental health challenges in their kids, it can be stressful and challenging for them and the family in general. So how would you encourage parents to maintain their own mental health while managing the stresses of parenting?
Well, great question, and one that I guess some of us might consider the $1 million question as a parent. But at the same time, I think it's really, really, really important to first and foremost acknowledge what's going on and what you're feeling. The way I like talking about it is what I call making a U-turn. So you make a U-turn into self, and you look at self and say, okay, what's happening in me? What am I experiencing? What am I going through? Yeah, today was a little hard, and getting my grade school child to doing their homework right now is just not working. And it doesn't necessarily mean that because it's not working, therefore let me try harder. Let me be a little more forceful. Who's to say that's the answer? Maybe the answer is, right now, maybe there shouldn't be homework. Maybe we shouldn't be doing something, and let's do something else. Of course, homework is important, but at the same time, it's not the end-all, be-all when it comes to a child doing what they're supposed to be doing in life. And it's not necessarily, I guess the best way to look at it, it's not worth it sometimes to win the war if you might lose the battle. And understanding that certain situations might call for me dealing with things differently. And especially when it comes to self. If I'm having a hard day because of things that I've gone through in my day, that goes into a big part of the recipe of what my parenting is going to be like for the rest of the day, and I have to understand that. So I think regulating and really seeing what's happening in self is so important. At the same time, when we talk about parenting, there's also, I guess you could say, reparenting the parent in a certain way, which is a parent taking care of themselves. Like, well, I know this is the way my parents dealt with me and it didn't work, so I want to make sure not to do that with my child. Well, let's say your child is a little more structured as an 8-year-old than you were, so maybe things have to be dealt with a little bit differently. And also could be the opposite. Let's say because I know how hard my parents were on this, I'm gonna make sure that, and it worked well for me, I'm gonna try that also with my child, and I'm gonna make them do that more also as with my child. But if we are able to see what's happening within self, if we're able to see how we're doing inside, that will be so helpful for how we're going to be parenting. And then we also have the concept, which, for a very long time I had a hard time saying these words, but I think I've come to learn that they're very important words. And I guess in the therapy world, we call it self-care. But the way I like talking about it, I guess it's a little more of a harsher word, is what I would call being selfish. And the way I say it that way is because it's very important for a parent to be selfish / self-care. Taking care of yourself is so important. There's a reason why on airplanes they say to put your mask on first before putting the oxygen on your child, because you have to do things for yourself. Now, I'm not here to say that make sure that all your kids have all their food and all their snacks before you take a bite, because if you're going to be a hangry parent, not going to work so well. So it's important to know how to deal with things that you're in, but knowing what's happening on the inside with yourself, and through you being able to take care of what's happening with yourself, you'll be a better parent as well. So knowing how to do things for yourself is going to be very, very important as well.
Yeah, fascinating. Parenting is one of those things that, there is no manual for, and we kind of, watch, you said this earlier, like we kind of see what our parents do, and we kind of either do the same or move away from that. And it's funny because everything else in life we study for, we prepare for. Like, I've seen someone fly a plane, but it doesn't mean I can fly a plane, right? And I think parents need to maybe take a step back sometimes and your podcast fills a great gap in that sort of space where parents can find the tools and find the resources and find the education. But many choose not to, or many don't, or sort of, maybe live in a bubble. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. How can parents, let's talk about resilience for 1 minute. How can parents foster resilience in children in the face of challenges, adversity, or failure?
Very, very loaded question. I know there's a lot more to that question than what you just asked, but on the surface, I'll answer it in a surface way, because I think it's a very important topic. And I think really what it comes down to, more than most other things, not to say other things are not important, more than most other things, is by mirroring and by kids seeing a parent the way they are with their resilience. There are some amazing books out there when we talk about resilience. They talk about being the best version of ourselves and doing things in a way where you got this and you can do this, and having the right motivational quotes. And there are plenty of those out there. But I think really what comes down to is a parent showing their resilience, and therefore a child seeing that within themselves, that, hey, I can do this also. And to your point that you're talking about before regarding there not being a manual, I believe there's a very good reason why there is no manual. Is because we might look at it as that, oh, let me try this manual for this child, and who's to say that the manual that you think is out there is right for your child? Now, we can learn all different tips and tricks, listen to all the podcasts and all the professionals, but who's to say that that's going to be good for my child? And I think one of the main jobs of a parent, and the biggest responsibility, is, okay, let me take all this information that's out there. How can I apply it to my child? Because no one should be telling you this is what you should be doing. No, as a parent, if you're an involved parent that's devoted to the well-being of your child, it's all about you. It's not about the books. And it's about you taking control and saying, I got this, let me figure this out. And even if the kids realize along that road that, okay, this is not working, let's try something else. Well, if a kid's there with you, that's teaching resilience, because mom's trying A, B, and C. We're speaking to this type of professional, going to this type of doctor. Things are not working. That lesson in itself, and that experience that a child is doing together with their parent, could be such an important lesson. The best example that I could think of for this, I remember listening to a lecture once, and with the question that one of the questions that were asked, where it was talking about deciding to start a family and find a loved one and start building a family at a young age. And one of the questions that were asked was, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to start a family at a young age? Shouldn't I first work on my career? Shouldn't I first, get a house, maybe even pay off the mortgage, have a nice stable way of life, and then go ahead and get married? And I honestly, at that point when I heard it, I was already married with 2 kids, and I was like, oh, that's actually a great question. I wish I would have done that in a certain way. But at the same time, I think there was, it did create some doubt within myself when I heard that question. Like, I understand that, but the answer that was given was a very, very wise answer. And unfortunately, I don't remember the guy's name when that was answering, but I remember what he said. And he said was because one of the most important things you can do as a parent is to have your child watch you grow up. And as children watch us grow up, and they watch us struggle to have a balance between work life, have struggle between how much attention I should be giving my child right now, as opposed to knowing that I have a deadline for work. And also I want to take a rest. And also I have to clean up the house. And also I have to fix the roof and do all these things. And that constant struggle / balance that we have, a child watching us go through that is one of the greatest acts of parenting that we can do. So if we're going to have a stable life, which is nothing wrong with, but if we're going to be having a life where, hey, I already have a house, bills are good, we have nothing to worry about, it does take away a little bit from the parenting experience, especially when it comes to a child watching us in a certain way. So I think that's a very important point. That I'm not here to say that everyone should get married young, but I think there's a certain I think added benefit when it comes to a child watching us go through something and how we deal with it. And I think when we are able to mirror things properly for them in a way where they're able to see, oh, this is the way, mommy dealt with death. This is the way, daddy deals with having some financial troubles. And a child sees that, that's one of the best things we can do as a parent if we're dealing with it properly.
Great advice indeed. I was thinking earlier, when I used to go out as a child, Mum wanted me to check in. I used to pull up my car at a phone box and put some coins in and call my mother. These days, it's we've got access to technology has changed. It's easy to communicate with my daughter. It was just a funny thought I was having earlier, but it led me to think that technology has changed the parent-child communication dynamic in some respects. So, how do you believe that it's changed? Do you think it's for the better or worse? I know it's a broad question, but in what ways do you believe technology has changed that parent-child dynamic?
Well, it is hard to answer that question, like in a podcast form, especially with the time that we have. I could tell you from what I've seen, both professionally and maybe even personally as a parent as well. And I would say that one of the biggest things that technology, for its benefit that has done, could help foster more communication and can help bring about the concept of connection towards others, whether it's family, whether it's group chats, or having something where it's just, making a surprise party for a loved one, and having that technology can be very beneficial to that, and sharing pictures with grandparents and aunts and uncles, and having a source where all information can go to be more connected towards others. And I would say the biggest part of that to be aware of is also the bigger distraction that it causes today than it ever has before. What I mean by ever has, meaning there's no other thing out there that I think has been more of a distraction to the family dynamics than technology. Again, that's a personal opinion. I'm not saying that with any facts, with any scientific basis, but I think for the most part, we have to know how to use it. And it's not about saying, oh, this is horrible, let's stay away from this. It's more about, okay, this is out there, how can we use this to our benefit? What it comes down to, I think, is something that I've learned from. I think one of the biggest pillars in the psychology / trauma world today, Bessel van der Kolk, in his book The Body Keeps a Score. One of the things that he talks about a lot over there is, and at least he's talked about in lectures that I've heard and supervision that I've been fortunate to get from him, is the concept of ABC. Always be curious. And as long as we stay curious about the technology, about our our own self, regarding our parenting techniques and how we're taking care of ourselves and how we're taking care of our children. When we stay curious, that's when we'll stay positive, we'll stay learning, we'll stay on the forefront of whatever needs to get done. So yes, technology can 100% be a very good thing, and it could really help us broaden our concept of what communication is, but also be aware of what it can do and the distraction it can cause. And it's a fine line, but one that needs to be reassessed constantly.
Yeah, so true. I've got a couple of teenagers myself and some older kids, but you often see them going through change, and emotionally, and sometimes they're withdrawn, sometimes they're more extroverted, if that's the right word. But when they're going through challenges, what are some of the signs as a parent that your teen might benefit from speaking with a psychotherapist?
Ooh, that's a great question. Also, a very, very loaded question. So really, I think it depends on what's happening. So what was there beforehand to know what's not there now? How much of it has to do with the situation, and how much has to do with what's happening on the inside? Like, for example, I actually had someone in my office today. Parents are very not happy with the teenagers' communication with them. And from the little bit that I was able to pick up, and we just had a intake today. Basically, the kid is very, very busy right now. He's just starting high school for the first time. He's already taking AP classes, which is like pre-college courses, in ninth grade, and as a freshman. And he's on the basketball team, and he also has to travel a little further distance than he was before. So if you add all those things together with the new rigorous schedule in high school, in ninth grade over here where he is, that's something that could be really hard to sort of get into a new structure change. And parents are more like, hey, he's not communicating with us. He's not paying attention by the dinner table. He's very distracted. He's not hanging out with us on weekends, when really all he wants to do is chill, not think about school, want to play his video games that he doesn't get a chance to play the entire week. And the parents have it under parental guidance, so he doesn't have a chance to do things to chill. So all he wants to do on weekends is chill, which I don't blame him in a certain way. Now, there has to be a balance, how to go about that chill, but also have the family. But I think when we go through changes, it's about assessing the situation. What is different? Whether it's is the eating habits different right now? Is there a physical appearance difference? Is it a social? Is there less patience? Or this child being more flippant and short to us? Or are they just being more reserved? Not to say that being reserved is a good thing, but it's on understanding what level of difference there is in a child's change that they're going through. And the example that I like thinking about is a tree. As a tree gets older, it starts branching out more. Doesn't mean that it's a bad thing, but branches, even though it may have started here, but as it branches out, it's creating more. And at a certain point, it'll start creating its own leaves. And then from there, another tree, hopefully one day. But that happens over time, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it loses its core, its middle, the part that it was connected to, its adolescence and its young teenage years. Well, that means right now it's just a different time. So assessing the scenario, I think, is something that is very, very important when it comes to saying, do we need to seek help for it? Also, I would think about looking at the sleeping patterns and maybe hygiene as well, social life. What is different? And if the child has a good friend and you happen to speak to them, I wouldn't necessarily say to call them, but if, let's say, they make a comment to you like, yeah, you're Johnny has been a little bit off lately. Okay, how long has that been going on for? What do you notice being the differences, right? When we think about those ABC type questions, you get to sort of see, okay, so he's not sleeping well. He looked like he's lost a little bit of weight. His grades went down a little bit. Maybe it's time for us to assess this a little bit more in a non-accusatory way, approaching the child and saying, I'm just curious. Things have been a little bit different recently. I noticed that you're much more reserved. Your whole body language is much more down and much more reserved towards the fetal position type things, which could be a sign of depression. It could be a sign of something else happening. So just being aware of what that situation is, being aware of what a child might be going through, and then saying, okay, maybe it's time we talk to someone else. Do you think you can benefit from having someone to talk to, or maybe going to see a medical professional so that we can see, has there been a change in weight? change in the physique, and how the person makes eye contact. It could be, all those things could be a part of what's happening to a child, but to first observe for self to see, okay, what is different? What is the concern that's coming about because of it? Because not necessarily every change is a bad change. So it's about understanding that, okay, there are things that are affected. This is now being affected, whether it's the family dynamics, school grades, social life, and then from there saying, okay, can we benefit from seeking out outer, more professional help?
That's incredibly helpful and insightful, Chananya. I appreciate you sharing that. Parenting is easy, so no one ever. That's your podcast. So tell us a little bit about the podcast and maybe your inspiration behind it.
So it was always something that I always liked podcasts. I think the concept of having a talk with other people could be very helpful. I know I learned a lot from the podcasts that I listened to. And I think it was during lockdown that I was like, maybe this is a project that I should get started on. I did 1 or 2 interviews and things got really busy. I didn't get a chance to do it. And I would say about 3-4 months ago, I realized, what, I really, really want to do this podcast. And I realized I'm blessed to love doing what I do. And I have, whether it's one-on-one sessions, family sessions, sometimes group sessions, and a few groups / workshops that I would run in like the trauma world. But I wanted to reach a bigger audience. So that's where a podcast came to play, because I realized the podcast is a place where I could talk to people that are 14-hour time differences for me. I can have conversations with people that may speak English but may speak a different dialect than I do, because they're they might be from Brazil or from Ireland. Just to name a few of the places that I've had opportunity to actually speak to people. So the concept came about of realizing, hey, there is something that I can do out there that can be more to the world and not just in my office itself. And when it comes to parenting, well, it's not easy. And for anyone that thinks that it is, either they're not a parent or they're not parenting. And the way I look at it is we're all looking for guidance in some way, shape, or form. And there's so many different topics, and just whether it's from breastfeeding to dental care to safety in schools, so many different topics that are out there that are so important for us to know more information about, that I figured having conversations with people that are professionals in specific areas, whether it's the ones that I mentioned or maybe other areas as well, that I think can be so beneficial for us to share and talk about and listen to other people and what they have to say, as long as people are staying curious. And hopefully it's through, the conversations that we have, people are able to say, hey, that applies to me. We recently had an episode about loss and, how the parent-child dynamic changes when mom gets remarried. And that's, a very, very touchy and very specific, intimate feeling that people might have based on their situation. Okay, so how does that apply to you, and what can you learn from this mom and son's story that could be beneficial to you? So I think it depends on what the situation is for what you might want to listen to, and that's really the goal of what the podcast is to have conversations with many different professionals and parents that have experienced specific areas in parenting that we all need help in, and that's what hopefully we will continue to do here on Parenting is Easy podcast.
Yeah, wonderful. It's if I'm being completely honest, with our version of the podcast was about had a business objective, and it was very much then aligned with trying to make an impact. But what it turned into very quickly was it became an education. Like sitting across from people like you, I started becoming a better parent, and I thought, like, this literally, I've made, page of notes here that I'm saying this, I'm going to take this away. Now, I'm probably not going to implement everything, but I'm going to think differently about the way I approach conversations with my kids, the way I approach conversations with others. And so I think the unexpected benefit of podcasting for me was just being able to learn and then, of course, create impact. So, look, thank you so much for your time today, your generosity. It's a conversation we've been trying to have for some time, Chananya. So thank you for making it. Just a fun question sort of to round off things.
Sure.
We ask all of our guests, and that is, if we had a time machine and you could go back to your, say, 12-year-old younger self, what's perhaps one piece of advice that you'd give to your younger self?
I've actually thought about this one, so it's not one I need to think about much. And I would say 2 words to them. And I would say, be patient. And I think that's something that I'm constantly telling myself now. And I think if I would have had that tattooed into my emotional brain when I was younger, that would have helped a lot in a lot of different areas as well.
Yeah, super. Now, Chananya, if people want to get in contact with you or be connected with you on the internet, how do we do that? Give us some contact details.
So people can check out my podcast. It's available anywhere podcast where you might listen to them. So that's Parenting is Easy podcast. And the title of the podcast itself is Parenting is Easy, Said No One Never. But you could find it under Parenting is Easy. There's a little cartoon character of me and a little teenager climbing out of a window. So that's my podcast. And you can also see me on my website for therapy. If you have any questions, you want to reach out, that would be CUA Therapy. That's CYUAH Therapy.com. And on Instagram, which I'm starting to get a little bit into, it's not something that I was that active until recently. That would be Parenting is Easy, Said No, the number 1 ever is the handle for Instagram.
Fantastic. Chananya Abraham, thank you for being on the show. Thanks for your generosity. We'll put those in the show notes. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Bye for now.
If you enjoyed the show, please connect with Jamie on LinkedIn or Instagram. You'll find links in the podcast description. Parenting in the Digital Age is sponsored by Skill Samurai, Coding and STEM Academy for Kids. Skill Samurai offers after-school coding classes and holiday programs to help kids thrive academically and socially while preparing them for the careers of the future. Visit skillsamurai.com.au.